Daniel Sports Center, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the big matchup coming up here in the Pac-12 in Week 11 of this 2022 college football season. And it's going to be over the Washington Huskies and the Oregon Ducks. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 11. You got Washington, who is quietly having a great season right now. This team is 7-2, and they've won 3 straight heading into this matchup as they take on Oregon, who some might consider to be the best team in the Pac-12 right now. Oregon is 8-1. Their one loss of the season came back in Week 1 to Georgia, but since then, the Ducks have been dominant. So definitely a huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 11. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with their team trends. Washington beat Oregon State 24-21 in Week 10, and that was a solid win for the Huskies, beating a ranked Oregon State team. And in return, Washington is ranked this week once again. They are 25th in the second edition of college football playoff rankings. And the Huskies, they got a really good quarterback, Michael Penix. I mean, this is the top-ranked passing offense in the country, and they're going up against an Oregon team that is very strong on offense as well. I mean, this has potential to become a shootout, that's for sure, with 2 great offenses. And Oregon being ranked 6th in the country right now, this team is really, I mean, they really responded well to that Georgia loss back in Week 1. I mean, this team just looked terrible in Week 1. It looked like Oregon was going to be a huge disappointment this season, and it was going to be a rough season once again after that Week 1 loss. But this team has really turned it around, and they've really found their stride down the stretch. I mean, you could consider Oregon to be one of the top 3 teams in the country right now just based on how they're playing. I mean, you think about it, the Ducks, if they would have either won in Week 1 to Georgia or even played some other opponent, some easier opponent, maybe out of the Mountain West or some FCS team, Oregon at 9-0 right now, this team is probably ranked 2nd or 3rd in the country. So, I mean, for the Ducks, it's been that was obviously a disappointment losing in Week 1, but since then, Oregon has really played well, and I would say this team is potentially a top 3 team in the country as of right now. But last week, they beat Colorado 49-10, a solid win for the Ducks. They are 8-1 on the season, and once again, an 8-game winning streak. Games on Saturday, November 12th in Eugene, Oregon. So the Ducks are the home team for this one, and your kickoff is 4 p.m. Pacific time. Spread's going Oregon by 13.5, so Oregon's favored by about 2 touchdowns here, over under 72.5. No surprise seeing that as high as it is. I mean, you got 2 great offenses here. This has potential to become a high-scoring shootout, that's for sure. And JFPI is going Oregon as well, 77.5%. Series history, Washington leads at 60-48, but Oregon has won the past 3 and also 8 out of the past 12. So, in overall history, Washington does lead the series, but Oregon has been better in recent history. Stat comparison for this one, Washington is 13th in points per game, 83rd in points allowed. Once again, this team is actually ranked as the top passing offense in the country, as you got Michael Penix, who's thrown for over 3,000 yards on the season, over 3,200 to be a little more specific, along with 23 touchdowns and 5 picks. Michael Penix, we saw him back in Indiana when he was first getting into his starting role as a Hoosier. I mean, he disappointed a little bit. I mean, the expectations were much higher for him, and he didn't even really reach that. But since he's transferred to Washington, he has really come around, and he's playing as good as he ever has right now. And I mean, this has been huge for Washington, having Michael Penix playing as well as he is. And I mean, this makes the Huskies a team that really can make a run for a really good bowl game. And this is a huge opportunity for the Huskies to place themselves as definitely one of the top 4 teams in the Pac-12. But otherwise, this team is 108th in rush yards a game, and then for yards allowed, they're 102nd in passing, 26th in rushing. So a pretty good rush defense here, but in the passing defense, this team is allowed an average of 237 yards a game, which is definitely not ideal. But as for Oregon, this team is 9th in points per game, 69th in points allowed. They're 24th in passage a game, 11th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, they're 126th in passing defense, and then they're 13th in rushing defense. So, I mean, this is something to keep in mind here. If you're looking at these 2 teams here and comparing their stats, Washington, the top passing offense in the country, going up against the 5th or 6th worst passing defense in the country. So you got Oregon, who is, I mean, that's their massive weak spot, is their passing defense. As I mean, yardage-wise, this team has allowed an average of 276 pass yards a game. I mean, this is a Washington team that could very well have their way against this Oregon defense, and that does concern me for the Ducks. If anything concerns me for Oregon, it is that particular stat. It's Washington And Michael Penix really having a great season, averaging 370 pass yards a game. That's far and above, that's beyond any team in the FBS right now. 370 yards. That's a lot of yards, in Washington having success on offense in that way. So for Oregon, this team, the Ducks, I feel like this is going to be a high-scoring matchup for that reason, especially if the Ducks win. This Oregon offense is going to have to excel against Washington, that's for sure, because Washington might just be able to score 4 or 5 touchdowns fairly on this Oregon defense, especially with the way Michael Penix and this offense has been playing. Recent matchups: Washington beat Oregon State 24-21, beat Cal 28-21. They beat Arizona 49-39. So coming off of 3 straight wins here, even though all 3 of them were fairly close. Lost to Arizona State 38-45. That was a very disappointing loss there. Also lost to UCLA 32-40. This team was ranked fairly high after their win over Michigan State way back in September, but this team did fall off a little bit just because of those 2 losses. But since then, this team has improved. But as for Oregon, this team beat Colorado 49-10. They beat Cal 42-24, beat UCLA 45-30, beat Arizona 49-22, and beat Stanford 45-27. This is the best team in the Pac-12 right now in Oregon. I really do believe that. Just the way they've been playing on offense, this team is, in their past 5 games, they're averaging 45-ish, 46 points a game. And so, this is a really good offense here. And, defensively, they could be better, that's for sure. And if the Ducks want to make a run for the college football playoff, which I definitely think they're still in contention for, by the way, this defense definitely does have to be better. Your key points: Washington Huskies are the top passing offense once again in the FBS. That is a key stat for this one, something you really have to keep in mind when predicting this matchup. The defense will determine the ceiling of this team. That's what I will say about Washington. Kind of the same thing for Oregon. Both teams are really good on offense, but defensively, both teams have been pretty inconsistent, kind of concerning at points. Washington allowed 39 points to Arizona, allowed 45 to Arizona State, allowed 40 to UCLA. So this defense has been poor at times, and you could say the same about Oregon, even though I would say Oregon's defense potentially has been slightly better. It was just that one game back in week 1 when they allowed 49 points to Georgia. That's really had a bad impact on their stat line there. But Washington, this team has got a chance to become a major Pac-12 contender here. At this point in the season, it looks like your main 4 contenders are Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Utah. But, Washington with a win here brings them up to 5-2 in conference. You need some chaos to ensue here, but you got that tiebreaker over Oregon in that case. So Washington isn't quite out yet, but they definitely need some help if they want to still make it to potentially a New Year's Six game. But it's within reason for the Huskies to make a run and finish out the season at 10-2, especially if you can win this one, which is obviously an uphill battle. But as for Oregon, since losing to Georgia, this team has been dominant. They've won 8 straight. They could be considered the top team in the Pac-12. I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12 right now for sure. It's kind of a tie between USC, UCLA, and Utah for the number 2 position. As of right now, I'd probably say UCLA, but Utah I also like, and I feel like USC's probably got the highest ceiling out of those 3 teams at this current point, but USC just hasn't been playing terribly good the past few weeks. But Oregon for this game, they got home field advantage, still in college football playoff contention, I do believe. The Ducks, they just got to keep winning their games, and if they can finish out the season as a 12-1 Pac-12 champion, I feel like you got a very strong argument to put Oregon in the playoff. But that said, let's get the prediction here for Washington and Oregon. This one's a tough one to predict, but I'm going to go with Oregon to win this game 41-38 is my predicted final score. I'm going with a high-scoring shootout here. If you're going to pick Oregon to win this game, honestly, might as well go with the over here, because this Oregon offense, they're going to need to score a lot of points, especially when you got a Washington offense and passing offense. Michael Penix going up against this poor defensive secondary in Oregon. Washington, I think, is very much able to score 30, upwards of 40 points in this matchup. So I think Oregon offensively going to need to score a lot of points, and I think that they do that. And in the end, they win the shootout 41-38. But I'll say 55% towards Oregon. I think Washington really has a chance to win this one. But I feel like Oregon also being at home, that does help the Ducks here. So I'll take the over 72.5 and Washington to cover the spread. I am definitely taking the Huskies to cover the spread in this matchup. It's currently right about 14 points. It's, to be exact, 13.5 towards Oregon right now. I'm definitely taking the Washington to cover the spread right now, just because I feel like the Huskies defensively. They're going to keep this game close, but Oregon wins this one in the end. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.